Hello, everybody. Welcome into DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. My name is Brandon Adams. We have a lot to do on today's program, and we're glad to have you with us as we do it all. One of the things we'll get into some on video on Facebook and YouTube today, by the way. For the folks on YouTube, apologize for the issues yesterday. But one of the things that we'll kind of get into is some of what's being said about Kirby Smart. Interesting article at CBSSports.com profiling the coaches that haven't yet won a national championship that may win one soon. And the case, obviously, as you know, for Kirby Smart is strong in that regard. We'll talk about that on today's show. There's a lot of recruiting stuff I want to get into with Jeff SENTELL here coming up in just a moment. So we'll do all of that. In fact, why don't we get rolling here by reminding you, as I said, our friends at ESOG do make the show possible. They are proud partners of UGA as well, so it's really fun to do business with them. Now, what might not be fun, though, is if you find yourself dealing with something that ESOG has made themselves experts in, foundation issues, waterproofing issues. We have had a lot of rain this year. That means your basement may be seeing water kind of creeping in every time the rain comes. Or you may be noticing some of those horizontal cracks that kind of show up in your foundation, all potentially signs of a serious problem, and a big reason why you want to reach out to my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. You know, sometimes small fixes require simple solutions, and ESOG can give that to you. Sometimes, though, we're talking about work that's just more substantial. Another reason why you want to trust Engineered Solutions of Georgia, because they have 2 full-time engineers on staff. As I said before, they're proud partners of UGA. Makes it fun to do business with Jay, Derek, the whole team over there. Please reach out to them. Easy number to remember. Simply dial 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We really appreciate ESOG for making DawgNation Daily possible here today. With that said, let's roll on. Let's talk some UGA recruiting. We'll bring in DawgNation's recruiting insider, Jeff SENTELL, who's had some great stuff up at DawgNation.com over the last couple of days. We'll deal with some of that here. We'll also deal with kind of some of the other stuff that's out there from a recruiting standpoint here right now. Jeff, I'll welcome you in and say good morning. And let me begin with this, if you don't mind. I think the subject of Noah Josie is a pretty interesting one right now, because when it comes to 2021 offensive linemen, we've obviously spent a lot of time talking about some other names. Micah Morris, who's in the fold for Georgia. Amarius Mims, who many people will believe eventually will be in that fold. Then there's Terrence Ferguson, and then there's Dylan Fairchild. And those are the names we've discussed. But based on what I read from you this past weekend at DawgNation.com, or this, I should say, within the last day or so here at DawgNation.com, when it comes to thinking about those offensive line priorities for 2021, Josie definitely belongs at that table, right, and deserves a place in that conversation.
Yeah, Brandon, I know folks like to dabble in that crystal ball theater and, you know, that sort of thing. And they look at Noah Josie and they wonder, hadn't heard his name a lot lately. Well, let's kind of stack up some things here like cordwood with Noah Josie. Number one, he's from an academically strong school, 3.7 GPA, 27 on really a warm-up rep on his ACT. He's known Matt Luke for quite some time. He's one of those adaptable guard center types. He is a track athlete. He will throw the discus and the shot. So it's giving you a lot of those familiar terminology for Georgia. But I can just simply say this, man. Kirby Smart spent an hour on the phone with Noah Josie on NFL Draft Day, going over the ins and outs and the bells and whistles of the program. And that, to me, says as much about priority and worth. And then also, you know, Noah, one of the things we asked him is, you know, how would you fit in the class? How many people are there? And Noah's been led to believe that Georgia's going to take 4 more guys after Micah Morris in that class. So, you know, we don't have to be North Avenue trade school graduates, as Mr. Munson used to say, to calculate that 1 + 4 would equal 5.
Yeah, you mentioned on a previous edition of our program. That was certainly interesting to hear, because I think maybe a lot of UGA fans have been operating on a different number. But certainly when you have 5 guys of the caliber that we've mentioned a lot of our conversations, easy to understand why Georgia would want to make room for as many as they possibly could. I guess on this subject for a moment, with the Tennessee recruiting momentum that we've seen as of late, and we've certainly shared some opinions on that here on our program, you know, you hear from a lot of Vols fans who say, well, because the relationship between Cody Brown and Amarius Mims is the next big name that the Vols are going to be going after here. And admittedly, Amarius Mims has tweeted a little bit about Tennessee within the last, I would say, 48 hours or so. You know, listen, I'll give Tennessee credit for what it's done up to this point in time, but for the most part, it's kind of gone after guys that weren't necessarily in Georgia's recruiting orbit. Mims is an entirely different, category when it comes to a situation like that. I don't necessarily take Tennessee serious as a threat for Marius Mims. Alabama maybe, but not Tennessee. Where would you come down on that?
Yeah, Brandon, to me, everybody wants to talk Tennessee now, and I don't know, man. I just don't get it. Can there not be a Friends marathon showing up, or everybody can recite their favorite Star Wars movies? I had this conversation with a couple of reporters nationally, regionally over the last couple of days. I even put something up on the DawgNation forum. I guess I would say wake me up when Tennessee wins a recruiting battle against a Georgia, an Alabama, an Ohio State, or a Clemson. When you look at Tennessee's recruiting class, let's do some interactive D&D, Brandon. If you like that, if this is like PTI around the horn, and you want to give me some thumbs up or whatever, let's do some of this. All right. Currently, Tennessee has a class that's made up of 18 commitments. Right. 12 of those are 3 stars.
Right.
The per player average is about 0.8945. Last year's per player average was 0.843, 0.822. So you're really talking about Tennessee just turning in their work early with a lot of commitments. It's basically the same structure as last year's class. This class doesn't have a quarterback yet. That could change on Saturday for Vol Nation with a young quarterback out of Texas, a top 100 quarterback out of Texas. Keeping going down the list, there's only 3 players, Brandon, 3 players in this Tennessee class that would rank among the top 230 prospects in the country on the 24/7 Sports composite. This current UT class, Brandon, has 4 running backs. Do we see any class in the world bringing in 4 running backs right now at any sort of time?
Yeah, not unless Tom Osborne's still coaching.
And then one more. Among those 18 commitments, there is 1 line of scrimmage recruit with a 4-star rating, Brandon. Just 1. Those are all signs to me that says, we've seen this channel before. We've seen this movie before. Proceed, sir.
Well, I think it's clear that what Pruitt has attempted to do is not impress you, someone who makes your living in the world of recruiting, and not impress me, someone who obviously follows this as closely as anyone can. This was all an attempt to impress the national media, the folks that don't pay as much attention to recruiting. And a lot of writers and Paul Feinbaum and people like that have certainly taken notice because they are easy to fool when it comes to recruiting storylines. They just don't follow it closely enough to really know what's going on. So from that standpoint, I think you're 100% right. I guess the only thing I'll kind of push back on, just for the sake of conversation, is while I don't believe that Tennessee has beaten Georgia head-to-head for anyone yet, Tennessee did beat Alabama head-to-head for Dylan Brooks, though, right?
Well, I mean, you could look at that one and you could go depth chart, Auburn, Alabama. The depth chart's much more wide open at Auburn and Alabama. I don't even know what Alabama's doing right now, Brandon. They only have like 3 commitments, 5 commitments, I think, currently in their class total. It seems like Alabama is just kind of ghosting everything and basically saying, wake us up when people can get on campus again in terms of taking commitments. Remember,
you know what this is, though, Jeff? I don't mean to cut you off, but Georgia has proven this too. The new recruiting momentum is not getting commits. That's when, for like the really elite programs, recruiting's going really well when they're not taking commits, because that means they feel very good about what is still on their board. We've seen Georgia go at a snail's pace in recruiting, and it's all resulted in, major league class at the end. We see Alabama kind of operating on that sort of 2018 Georgia timeline here for right now, and the odds are it's all going to kind of fall into place there at the end. The new recruiting momentum is when you don't get commits.
Yeah, it's kind of like winning ball games in March and April, right, Brandon? It's how you do it. You could conjecture up some weight room analogies and some on-field analogies, but I think, in terms of calculating some coverage earlier this month, Brandon, when I wrote about decommitments and how Georgia used to have to take a bunch of commitments in spring to maybe, roll up their sleeves a little bit and hike their britches up and show the world that, oh, wow, Georgia's getting another recruit, getting in the headlines. Well, it usually led to a lot of decommitments. It usually led to a lot of, okay, these were placeholders in the class when better players were ready to decide. And I think that's the part where Tennessee's at with the maturity of its program right now. For those that want to worry, I mean, I think Georgia's stacked up at least 3 years now of elite recruiting classes on top of the Vols. And I think the major thing to think about, and this is just what the 2021 cycle feels to me as a whole, I think Georgia's program is so stacked right now where, remember, I think it's the constant infusion of five-star talent everybody wants to see and hopes to see, which really is happening at kind of an unprecedented level. You look at the yin and yang of Georgia recruiting. Remember when they loaded up in 2017 with tackles, and then the 2018 cycle was a little bit of an off year in terms of, yeah, they got Cade Mays, but then they also brought in a guy that like Owen Condon. And in 2019, you saw Xavier Truss, Warren McClendon. Those are very good players, even All-American players even, but they weren't really those elite titans, I guess you would say, in terms of the following year when Georgia adds two of the top three tackles in the country in Tate Ratledge and Amarius Mims. And I know, and believe me, folks, Jeff's not trying to let anyone down easy or let anyone, jump off a cliff this Tuesday, this fine Tuesday morning. But when you think about Amarius Mims, some of the chatter you get about Amarius Mims is he even recognizes that Georgia signed two elite offensive tackles in the previous class, whereas, maybe other schools didn't do that. But that would be kind of the pushback where Georgia has to hold on to Amarius Mims. It's not, oh, Tennessee's great, Alabama's great. It's that, has Georgia got enough immediate talent? Remember, Broderick Jones and Tate Ratledge are bona fide killers that are going to eventually star for Georgia. And when someone starts worrying, as hard as it is to get our audience, especially my audience, to think about, oh my gosh, Jeff, who's the next person we need to worry about? I mean, Amarius Mims could come into Georgia as a signee and be 110% of the player he's supposed to be. And there's going to be no guaranteed, fast lanes or express lanes to a position. There's going to be Broderick Jones, who has every bit the resume and then some that Amarius Mims currently has right now. There's going to be Tate Ratledge. There's going to be Xavier Truss. There's going to be Warren McClendon. So I think these are all good. I'm going to resurrect a fun term for you, Brandon. These are rich program problems for Georgia in terms of, you look at this recruiting class, and there's a lot of Barrett Carter smoke out there right now. And
yeah.
Surely, if he goes to Clemson,
we'll get there before this conversation's done, Jeff. I can promise you that. But go ahead and finish your point.
Well, we'll tease that one, Brendan. I got one teed up on Barrett, so when you get to Barrett, I'll share that thought.
All right, we'll do that in a minute. I also want to talk running backs here or there as well. Before that, though, let me just give you a quick, window into my philosophy about something. I'm a big believer that traditional college is not for everyone. There's nothing wrong with going to a traditional university. But when it comes to like the debt that can kind of pile up while you're in school, and frankly, the somewhat limited job market that can emerge depending on what your degree might be in, the fact of the matter is that can be a mistake that a lot of people ought to try to avoid if they possibly can. That's why I'm such a big fan of the work that's being done by a lot of our technical colleges around the state of Georgia. In fact, let me tell you about one of those right now. Coastal Pines Technical College has got a great thing going on today. Please make sure you listen to me closely. If you're the parent of a child who's getting ready to kind of embark on that sort of next phase post-high school, or you yourself are a young person kind of thinking about what's next for you after high school, think about the ways in which you can kind of put yourself on a path towards a rewarding career and just really benefit for this for decades and decades to come. Coastal Pines Technical College has got a free application day today. That's right. You can start using this summer to start working on an incredibly rewarding career. Free application today, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Simply go to this website. If you're watching on video, you'll see this on your screen. It's coastalpines.edu. Once again, coastalpines.edu. Now, this is only available for the first 400 applicants. My expectation is a lot of folks are going to hear this, dive right into that website, take advantage of it. So please don't miss out on your chance for a free application. Coastalpines.edu is the website, as I said before. You want a rewarding career, you want unlimited job prospects, unlimited potential for financial reward, and just a very satisfactory life. Check out the great work being done by Coastal Pines Technical College and put yourself on that path here today. Coastalpines.edu, free application today from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. when you head over there and visit them online. Okay, Jeff, a couple running back things. First of all, if I've had my ear to the online chatter correctly, it certainly appears that Will Shipley's about to go off the market. I believe he's set to commit. Smart Money has him going to a Clemson, I believe, on that. Georgia I shouldn't say Georgia lost out on, but a running back that we've at least talked about before, Cody Brown from Parkview, is now off the market. He's at Tennessee. Is there any reason you think a UGA fan should be nervous about the is it winnowing is the right word? Winnowing amount of running backs still in the open market. Georgia's obviously got a commitment from a good one when it comes to Lavassier Carroll. L.J. Johnson's still out there. Donovan Edwards still out there. Georgia's got some targets, but the number of available running backs is diminishing somewhat. Where does that leave UGA in its pursuit for what I believe is multiple running backs for the 2021 class?
Yeah, I think it's multiple running backs, Brandon, but I think they've already got one of them in the fold. I think another vignette we can share about Tennessee, Georgia is yesterday or over the weekend, Brandon, Tennessee picks up an excellent running back and four-star running back,
Sure.
Cody Brown. There's no Jet and a Kendall Mill. Cody Brown. I think the priority and remains the priority. And they can sit there and go and play as a returner. He's making a play as a Wildcat quarterback. Much like maybe even a more souped-up model of Deja.
Let you go. And you mentioned Barrett Carter a moment ago. And listen, here's my take on this. When Georgia loses a Miles Murphy to Clemson the last cycle, kind of a classic 4-3 defensive end, someone who seemingly is a great position fit for what Clemson's wanting to do, there's a degree to which you just sort of understand that. And, you know, it's not a recruiting loss that you are glad to see happen, but it's at least one you can kind of connect the dots and understand how it occurred. When you look at what you think you know about Georgia, former Butkus Award winner and Roquan Smith, you know, great recruiting pedigree, didn't really prioritize the linebacker position in the previous cycle, so therefore there's room to take a good number of them here in this class. Obviously, Ismail Mondon may be the number one priority, but Barrett Carter is on that list somewhere, and yet you can't deny all of the online chatter that connects Carter to Clemson at the moment. This would be a recruiting loss for me that would sting a little bit, just given the circumstances around it. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so, you know, Brandon, let me see if I can use my appropriate 80s, 90s NBA basketball metaphors here. Please let me know if you're going to allow these.
Go ahead.
Georgia and Clemson are kind of going to be like Lakers, Celtics, Magic Bird, or even more likely Pistons and the Bulls, especially because Georgia hasn't won that championship yet. Everybody's watching The Last Dance. And true, Barrett Carter is a sublime fit for the Georgia inside linebacker core. They didn't take an inside linebacker last year. He, to me, seems like a guy in Georgia's scheme. You have the big tackle up front, the big tackles up front soaking up blocks, come downhill, do a lot of the things that number 3 used to do for Georgia on that 2017 Georgia football team. So Barrett Carter, man, I think the dude's one of my favorite players to talk to. I think he's going to go be an All-American wherever he chooses. I don't even know if Georgia's the second choice right now for Barrett Carter. But I'm going to say this, and it is what it is. Quay Walker, Channing Tindall, Nakobe Dean, those guys did not get an express lane to major playing time at Georgia, even when the ramps were clear. Barrett Carter would be a big loss, a tough loss for Georgia. But if you guys have been following this program for a while, I'm not going to couch it up and dial it up to be any more significant of a potential loss to Georgia's inside linebacker room as Noah Sewell was last year to the Oregon Ducks. Now,
I was going to follow up. We heard Kirby Smart say in the Feinbaum show a couple of weeks ago that, hey, there are programs outside the SEC saying you don't want to go to a place like Georgia or a place in the SEC because it's too tough. Should I assume that maybe certain coaches are telling Barrett Carter, do you really want to go be a part of so much depth at a place like Georgia where admittedly, very highly rated recruits like Channing Tindall, Quay Walker more so lately, but certainly Tindall and, no certain future for Ryan Davis right now, Tresman Marshall. Is that part of the negative recruiting pitch against Georgia towards Carter?
I don't think I think everybody wants to dabble in the negative, but if Dabo didn't want to dabble, I would say he could just stress the positives. I mean, Clemson is an elite kind of perfect silver spoon program right now. It wins. It doesn't face the challenges that other schools do in the SEC. They're putting guys in the draft. They can tout that Isaiah Simmons role all they want because that's what they've been telling Carter for the longest time. And I remember talking to Carter from the infancy, and he always looked at himself as a player that has a lot of the same game as Isaiah Simmons does. And so you see all those things. And, the funny thing with Clemson is they're kind of pitching that Isaiah Simmons role to a lot of athletes in this class. There's Derek Davis, another talented defensive player as well. There's James Williams. That term of positionless football, Brandon, and you want to get somebody's ears perked up in the coaching circles right now when they're on their Zoom meetings, when they're looking for players, when they find a player that is positionless, You see where the NFL just drafted defensive athlete Isaiah Simmons, the aforementioned Isaiah Simmons. They're looking for players like that they go. And I think a great example would be a James Williams for Georgia. He's a guy that can cover up a 5-star tight end. He's a guy that can come down in the slot. He's a guy that can cover in the box. He's a guy that can come down and run support. If somebody's going tempo like Gus Malzahn or whomever out there or Ryan Day, they can just say, hey, we got James over here. He can play the outside edge here right now. We don't need to substitute because the offense didn't. I look at James Williams, and he is another one of those true positionless athletes where that young man can literally do everything on the defensive side of the ball.
And by the way, you can read more about that really good story from Jeff SENTELL up at DawgNation.com right now. Hope you'll check that out. Let me squeeze in one final thing before we let you go. Speaking of things that you've written at DawgNation.com, interesting look at Dallas Turner, where his recruitment stands at the moment. Obviously, Alabama is a major factor in this. This kind of strikes me, Jeff, as one of those, inconveniences associated with the coronavirus shutdown. Had Georgia had a more normal recruiting period right now, chance to get Turner on campus, maybe host him for a G-Day, something along those lines, my guess is that Georgia coaching staff would have more of a chance to work its magic with him. As it stands right now, it seems like there's only so much UGA can do to sell Turner through the magic of, video teleconference. Georgia needs kind of an open pathway to start getting these guys back on campus. I have a feeling things could change with Dallas Turner at that point in time.
Hey, Brennan, is it too soon for me to say that everybody out there would rather Georgia trail Alabama than lead Alabama in this current circumstance?
Oh, please. We can't go down that road. That brings up too many unhappy memories for me.
Oh, but with this one, it's really just a trophy case lead is what it sounds like, Brandon. He looks at Alabama's pedigree with NFL pipelines and players, and he looks at Alabama's championships. And that's kind of an undeniable fact when he's got a head-to-head with Georgia and Alabama. And it's been a head-to-head for Georgia and Alabama for quite some time. The two schools he visited when he could go visit schools, those were Georgia and Alabama. Now, I know you'd love to hear this school again in one of your valued slots of your program, but Clemson also recently offered Dallas Turner as well, Brandon. There's another potential foil in the ointment there for Dallas Turner. I think with him, one reason, Brandon, I'll just speak off the riff here. One of the reasons I like writing that story about Dallas Turner and how he felt, and it was a slight lead between Georgia and Alabama, because, man, that just felt like a normal recruiting story to write. A kid has a leader. One power program is slightly ahead of another. There's a chase. There's a recruiting race. For me, writing that one about Dallas Turner, one of the good dudes in this class, it's kind of returned to normalcy when you could write about a recruiting race again.
That's good stuff, Jeff. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We'll look forward to reading a whole bunch more of those good old-fashioned recruiting stories from you in the days ahead at DawgNation.com. And, of course, speaking to you on our program again very soon as well.
All right, man. Take it easy. Take care of everybody out there.
All right. Good stuff there from Jeff SENTELL. And make sure you check out all those stories there at DawgNation.com. I think you'll be glad you did. Some really good stuff from him. We're going to get ready to roll into a lot of our comments, and we can talk what Jeff and I were discussing on the recruiting front. We can kind of get into some of what I wanted to start the show with and kind of briefly touch on. I'll do a lot more of this in the podcast. Just the general feeling that of where Kirby Smart ranks amongst the coaches, like James Franklin, like Dan Mullen still, like Ryan Day at Ohio State, who haven't yet won a national championship, looking to kind of break through that ceiling and do that. My overall take on this from a Georgia perspective is that sometimes because Smart has been on the job for 4 years and Georgia's come up close but no cigar in a couple of those seasons, that it can kind of feel like time is getting away from you. But the honest truth is, for Georgia, time is really on their side, because it's sort of like having the house edge in blackjack. You want to be the casino. You want guys to keep playing, because the longer they keep playing, the more likely the odds are to kind of fall in your favor. It's the same thing for Georgia here as well. Georgia's got the house edge that comes from having better players than almost everyone that it plays. They really only 2 or 3 teams in the country that Georgia could play that have the potential of having more measurable talent than what Georgia does. So as long as that remains true, Georgia remains very much in the national championship picture. And frankly, as many of those seasons as you can kind of stockpile together, the more likely it becomes, as the writer Ryan Fernelli from CBS, or Tom Fernelli, I should say, from CBS Sports said, it's just simply a matter of time before Georgia fans get a chance to enjoy that. I believe that's very likely true. I believe that what we're eventually looking at is a scenario where eventually the Georgia fans' patience is going to be rewarded. So we can talk about that. We can talk about recruiting. We can talk about everything else here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia here today. Now, we'll get some of your comments on YouTube first, because Obviously, we missed out on a lot of those folks yesterday. Devin Glenn says Kirby will get the trophy for sure. Yeah, my confidence in the fact that it's eventually going to happen has not really wavered at all. When's it going to happen? Is 2020 the year? 2021 the year? I honestly don't know. But we are still so in the middle of this championship window that it's not closing in my mind for the foreseeable future. Doesn't make the impatience a little harder to live with sometimes for Georgia fans because they've obviously been dealing with this for a while. But eventually, I do believe that patience is going to be rewarded. Jerry Dog fan says, I'm ready to see the mentor beat the master. I hope Kirby beats Saban with a late game coaching decision in Tuscaloosa. I'm tired of hearing about a second 26, and I understand where he's coming from on that, and that'll be a great thing to see. And obviously, there's a lot at stake from a narrative standpoint when Georgia and Alabama get together in September. Frankly, if Kirby were to lose it, there's going to be some discussion of, we'll see, Kirby's still not ready to win a game like this. However, if Nick Saban loses it, there's also going to be some discussion of, wow, Saban's not quite what he once was. He will have lost his most recent game to Kirby, will have lost his most recent game to Gus Malzahn, lost his most recent game to Ed Orgeron. If you want to throw this in there, will have also lost his most recent game to Dabo Swinney. So a lot of his coaching contemporaries can look and say, hey, we've got a current winning streak going against Alabama. And you better believe that he'll feel the pressure about that in Tuscaloosa. Alabama fans are restless by nature. Even with all the success that Nick Saban has enjoyed, that doesn't insulate him from potential criticism. So for really either of the two coaches in the game in September, and I still believe the game will be played in September, but for either of those two coaches, the loser of that game has a narrative that he's going to be forced to combat, and we kind of know what it is for both sides. Stephen Venanzi checks in on YouTube to say Tennessee's schedule has them playing Alabama, Florida, and Oklahoma this year. If they get at least two of those three games, I guess we give them some credit, but not until then. I think that is true, and when you factor in, obviously, Georgia on that, that's four pretty top-flight teams. The Oklahoma game early in the season for Tennessee, I believe, is winnable. The Florida game, maybe to a degree, winnable. Is Alabama winnable yet? I'd say no. Although, admittedly, Tennessee's actually played a little closer with Alabama a couple times. You might realize they covered the spread against the Crimson Tide last year. Georgia, I would say not quite winnable yet, but for the first half or portions of the first half a year ago, Tennessee gave Georgia a bit of the game. But that is true. And, I don't take it as far in terms of downplaying Tennessee's recruiting wins as Jeff SENTELL did a moment ago. I said on yesterday's show, and I spent a lot of time on the podcast talking about this, that ultimately what's happened over the last few days doesn't mean what Tennessee fans think that it means, but it may mean a little bit more than the non-Tennessee fan who follows recruiting things. As I've said before, once Georgia really built its recruiting machine, 2017 rolling into 2018 and then continuing on to this day, all of the oxygen in like half of the SEC footprint, all the oxygen got taken completely out of the room. For the most part, since all this has started, Auburn really hasn't had much of a high-profile recruiting win. Florida hasn't had much of a high-profile recruiting win. Tennessee hasn't had much of a high-profile recruiting win. They've had a couple of Darnell Wright, you probably count him as that. But for the most part, they haven't really had a lot of, whoa, did you see who Tennessee just got, or did you see who Auburn just got? Did you see who Florida just got? No, the SEC recruiting success has belonged to Georgia, and then out west, Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M. Those are the only programs that have any recruiting wins to speak of whatsoever. So the fact that Tennessee's gotten a couple, Terrence Lewis, Dylan Brooks, those are at least the kinds of things that you notice because pretty much all the five stars have been kind of going to the same places for a long time. So anybody else getting a five-star is at least somewhat noticeable. But as the commenter mentioned, the challenge of taking the roster that you have now and then adding to what Tennessee did a year ago is not going to be easy because, as you said before, there are at least 4 games on paper to begin the season that Tennessee's a point spread underdog in, and the South Carolina game tougher than you realize if you're a Vols fan. The Kentucky game may be tougher than you realize if you're a Vols fan. There are a great number of these sort of toss-up style games added into a scenario in which Tennessee's at least a point spread underdog in 4 games. So I believe it's kind of ironic. I expected Tennessee to be recruiting better earlier under Jeremy Pruitt than they did because they had so much early playing time to sell. The truth is the Vols didn't win a lot of those recruiting battles that I thought they would in the early days of Jeremy Pruitt. You're not able to convince some of the guys they had visits with it. They've done well in getting visits. They've gotten a lot of visits, but they haven't converted those visits into commitments and signings maybe as much as I thought a team that had early playing time to sell would have been able to do. All of a sudden now the recruiting momentum is starting, and maintaining the on-field momentum. The truth is Tennessee was, while worse in recruiting than I expected, they were better on the field last year than I probably expected them to be in total. And as that's taking place, maintaining that heading to the upcoming season, I think it's going to be pretty hard to do. In fact, I don't fully expect Tennessee to maintain all that recruiting momentum. All right, let me get a couple more here. I've been on YouTube. Let me get a couple more YouTubes because I gave them nothing yesterday. Then we'll do a lot of Facebook after that. Jay Shipe says he believes that Auburn will be Georgia's closest game. I wouldn't discount that. I wouldn't discount that at all. Vegas has already told you they view Georgia as less than a touchdown favorite. Games at home, the numbers that I've seen currently favor Georgia by about 4.5. For all the attention that Alabama gets, for all the attention that Florida gets, especially Florida. We know Alabama on the road is what it is. That's a very, very tough road test. The appearance of being the toughest regular season game thus far in the Kirby Smart era. We understand all of that. That Auburn game that flies below the radar in October for the first time between these two teams, I think that Georgia-Auburn game is very much worth paying attention to and not discounting at the expense of making too much of Georgia-Florida. I believe the Jay is pretty right about that. Bank Six says, I'd rather Kirby get up and Saban by a couple possessions again, and instead of going conservative, keep foot on the gas. We need to develop a killer instinct to finish these teams off. I don't think that's unfair from Bank Six at all. Real Dream XP says, if we beat Alabama in September, do you see us going undefeated in the regular season? I think it kind of comes down to, how tough is, as I mentioned before, Auburn able to be for Georgia in October. I know for a fact that that Georgia's going to be ready for the Florida game. There's just no way there won't be. And I think given some of the stuff that's gone on recently means that Tennessee in November will fully have Georgia's attention as well. Probably already did, but even more so because of some of the, recent chatter. The transfer of Cade Mays notwithstanding. The Auburn game in October, because what you see from a lot of teams is it's very tough to win big games when they're clustered closely together. So if Georgia beats Alabama in sort of mid-September and turns around a couple weeks later and then beats Auburn, that's the kind of thing that a national championship type team would typically do. And only elite teams usually win games like that when they're clustered so close together, winning them in pairs, I mean. So, yeah, if Georgia beats Alabama in September, you turn your attention to what happens there in October against Auburn. If you can pull together two top-end performances like that, so close together, that'd be a huge, huge statement for what happens for Georgia. But even if Georgia beats Alabama, the Auburn game is still a losable game, I guess is the point that I'm kind of getting to there. But really good comments on Facebook today, and I'm glad we're able to do that again here. Let's see what's going on over here. Lucy Bowers-Boykin checking in, saying, running a little bit late. Well, we're glad to have you with us nonetheless. Appreciate you being a part of that. Winston Mock also mentioning the Noah Sewell thing that Jeff SENTELL was bringing up a moment ago. My Facebook comments have been a little bit weird lately. It seems like the comments are populating a little slow here. But nonetheless, we're all glad to have you with us. JC Howell says the YouTube stream is messed up again. I don't think so. I think it's been kind of going okay. Let's see what's going on. We're either not. Antoine Middleton says, honestly, if Todd Monken's everything we hope he is, UGA will be this year's version of LSU with Joe Brady. You obviously see the path forward for Georgia when it comes to that. You obviously see what Brady's impact was able to be on LSU a season ago. And I've written about this going back to the weekend at DawgNation.com, that for everything you make of all the 6,000 passing yards or whatever it was that LSU put together this past season, they also rushed for nearly 4,000 yards there as well, or some crazy numbers like that. I may be slightly off on my numbers. Point is, Clyde Edwards-Helaire alone rushed for more than 1,400 yards. That the upgraded passing offense benefited the running game. And Bill Conley's got a piece up at ESPN.com talking about the proliferation of the spread offense throughout college football. You really see the same thing there, that we sort of think of spread means throw it. The overall passing numbers per game have not been going up in college football as of late. Teams still average about the same number of passes per game as they did about 10 years ago. That the growth of the spread has also generated growth in the running game too. And you can cite examples of that around, college football. Frankly, you cite examples of that in the NFL. Look what LaFleur's doing at Green Bay. Look at what Shanahan's doing at San Francisco. Certain spread style concepts being employed, but running game being a big part of that. So being more modern with the offense has not been at the expense of running game for a lot of teams. And I did tell John Stinchcomb yesterday, I've said this before, I do think for whatever reason, Alabama traded a aspect or two of its physicality to become a little bit more explosive offensively. And frankly, I hope Georgia's not forced to make the same kind of trade. I have said that. But for the most part, the teams that have gotten better through the air, who've adopted some of the spread style concepts that have been in vogue in college football, LSU is an example of this from a season ago, they have not lost their running game for doing so. Winning teams get to run. And when you're, as Todd Monken has said, throwing to win, all of a sudden greater opportunities are created for those running backs. And that's something that's available to Georgia here. We'll roll into our R.S. Andrews cool down, and I'll remind you, even as I speak to you right now, the air conditioning in my house is on. I can kind of feel it touching my cheeks area above where the facial hair is growing. I can feel that air conditioning, and it feels so good. And if you find yourself not feeling that, or when you click that air conditioning on, not knowing if it's going to work, if it's going to cool your house down, maybe thinking that your system might be on its last legs, well, R.S. Andrews can give you the peace of mind that you need for the hot weather season to come. They can tune your system back up to factory fresh specs. But you've got to reach out to them online at rsandrews.com. They will take good care of you on that. And it's not just air conditioning. It's heating systems, it's plumbing, it's electrical. They can be trusted to do all of that. In fact, if your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. Very easy to do business with, and Dari and the whole team over there, good folks to do business with. Find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, a couple more Facebook comments. Let's see what's going on here. Robert Barnes, who finds a way to complain about everything, says, been talking about Tennessee for 2 days. This is still DawgNation, right? Robert, sorry that you're unhappy. Let's see what else is going on. Wally Foster says, we want to be the best Georgia, not the next Alabama or LSU. I understand where you're coming from on that, but success leaves clues. The idea that Georgia is going to chart a path for a championship for itself that's far different than what other teams who found that success are doing, it's just not likely. This is one of those elements where you probably don't want to be the Lone Ranger. Saying that you're going to be kind of a unique sort of category of one in terms of how you win a national championship, that's just probably not all that likely. So while I think it's true that you don't have to completely replicate in Alabama, nor do you have to completely replicate in LSU, nor do you have to completely replicate another team that's recently won a national championship in Clemson, you don't have to completely replicate them. But if what you're doing isn't replicating them at all, or not replicating them very much, then I think you have to wonder if your particular philosophy is just too unique to be successful. Good point, though. A couple more. Terry Rigdon mentions what Kellen Mond had to say. Yeah, we talked about this, Terry, on the podcast edition of the show yesterday, the fact that Kellen Mond's feeling pretty good about his team. What I said in response to Mond, who says he thinks that A&M could be the next LSU, I do believe that A&M has a chance at a very good season. In fact, I've said before, I think they could go 11-1 and just miss out on winning the SEC West. However, the one thing that I don't agree with, though, is the idea that A&M needs to look at LSU as the blueprint. The truth is, A&M's got a good offensive coach, Jimbo Fisher. I think his track record speaks for itself. He has developed quarterbacks very well, and game planning against his offense is not an easy thing to do. It's different than some of these other offenses, but it's a very difficult offense to game plan against. I think that Jimbo's a very smart offensive mind. What A&M is missing, though, is not what LSU had in last season. LSU had the toughness on defense. They had the history of running the football. They just needed a more modern approach offensively. I think A&M is the exact opposite. I think A&M has had a Big 12-style coach in Kevin Sumlin, and frankly, the stench remaining from the time he spent in the Big 12 prior to joining the SEC in 2012. The Big 12 is not a physical league. It's just not. That's not overly simplistic caricature drawing. It's just a fact. The entire conference only had 21 players selected in last month's NFL draft. This is just a league that essentially plays kind of a glorified version of 7-on-7. And when you've been in that for as long as A&M has been, it's kind of hard to sort of reboot and become physical, especially when you've only now hired a coach. And Jimbo Fisher is cut from a very similar cloth to Kirby Smart. When you're trying to instill that physicality, playing better defense, running the football, it's just hard to do that. A&M actually played better defense last year than you might realize. They've got a very good coordinator in Mike Elko, but running the ball, it's something that A&M has not done very much yet. So I think the comparison is off between A&M and LSU, because what A&M needs, LSU already had. Finding a way to be as physical as you need to be. Really, the path that A&M is traveling right now is maybe a similar one to the one that Georgia traveled when it first hired Kirby Smart. A couple more here on Facebook. We're going to get ready to roll out of here after that as part of our Andrews cool down. Mark Brantley says the pass can open up the run. I completely agree with that. And I also agree that it may not be realistic to say that Georgia completely matches the LSU production from a season ago. That may be just asking too much because of how amazing that it was. But still, if it's in a similar vein, as the commenter said, using the pass to set up the run as opposed to the opposite. Very quietly, Georgia was not nearly as effective running the ball last season as people had grown used to them being. Offensive line did not have as good a year. Running backs in particular, the production was way down. And the reason why is easy to understand. Georgia could not throw a counterpunch when teams set up to stop the run. Therefore, teams were never dissuaded from doing that. That's what Todd Monken has brought to Georgia to do. Open up the passing attack, so now running the ball is just a little easier. Running the ball for Georgia last season, even with DeAndre Swift, just became too hard. All right, a couple of more of your comments. Joel Moody says he likes the statement that Georgia will throw to win. Yeah, that's something that Monken said, not about Georgia in particular, but about his offensive philosophy when he was hired by the Cleveland Browns. I've played the audio before, and we'll try to do that again for you. Pete Williams on the subject of the quarterback saying at least Newman's experienced, not a freshman with no experience playing college football. And I do think for Georgia this upcoming season, that experience will matter. By the way, Mark Brantley also says that he thinks A&M will win the West this year. I think of it as a top 10 team. Hugh Nash has got Bama losing 3 games. Boy, that'd be something to see. Ken Trollis Tyson says, who do I think wins the SEC West? I still got Alabama doing that. I think that Alabama's tough to topple here this particular year. I do. But I think of A&M as better than Auburn, as better than LSU. I'll have A&M just below Alabama in that race. Let me get a couple more YouTubes. We'll get ready to go. James Wade says all 20 draft-eligible LSU players are on NFL rosters. That's unbelievable. Yeah, that is very impressive. You got to give him credit for that. You have to. Tristan West says LSU was unbeatable by the end of the season, but we played to their strength. I kind of agree with both those fronts. On both those fronts. I do think LSU was more beatable earlier in the year. And if I had to guess, I think one of the things you'll see is that Derek Stingley, who I believe by the end of the season was the nation's best defensive back, he was kind of coming into his own over the course of the year. It's just tough to play cornerback as a freshman in the SEC. By the time he got fully cemented there, I think LSU as a unit just got way, way better. That's my guess, because defensively they were a lot stingier by the end of the season they had been near the beginning of the season. I think that LSU is going to be a very tough team for Georgia to beat no matter what. But I do think that, as the commenter mentioned, unfortunately, the SEC championship game, Georgia did play into LSU's hands a little more than I would have wanted them to. Obviously missed on some attempts and some explosive plays early in the game, which if you're able to connect on those makes all the difference in the world. But ultimately, even though Auburn had success in that 7 defensive back look against LSU, and probably from a statistical standpoint, no one managed the LSU offense last year better than Auburn's did. The truth is Auburn was never really much of a factor to win that game. They just kept it closer from a Vegas standpoint, which is not nothing, but they were never much of a factor to win that game. I thought that Georgia's defensive game plan against LSU was probably ultimately a little too conservative, and ultimately it became one of those situations of you just sort of prolonged the inevitable. It was not easy to game plan defensively against LSU a year ago, but Georgia taking the element of pressure completely out of the game, I think just prolonged what was eventually going to happen, which was Georgia was going to end up giving up yards and points to LSU and ultimately lose that game. When Georgia faces a high-powered offense like that in the future, and they'll probably see one at some point in 2020, my hope is that Georgia's ready to dial up the pressure more, unleash some pass rush, because you've got to have those negative plays defensively to counterbalance what's happening with explosive plays offensively. Let's see what else is going over here on YouTube, and then we'll get one more Facebook comment and get out of here. Anything else we want to hit on over here? Yeah, by the way, Tristan West made a similar point on YouTube to what I had said a little earlier. George Herndon says Zeus will be loose as a moose. I like that. And I am looking forward to what Zamir White brings to the table this year. The one comparison I keep making is when you look at the way that Nick Chubb, another year removed from his 2015 knee injury, I believe was much more explosive in 2017 than he had been in 2016. That's an exciting thing to think about with Zamir White. Not only benefiting from a more wide open offense, but just kind of an increased level of explosiveness now that he's another year removed from the injury that he, really the two injuries that he suffered in back-to-back seasons not all that long ago. I think this Zamir is a lot of fun to think about for this upcoming year. And frankly, I've got high expectations for Kendall Milton. The role that they may try to find a way to use James Cook, maybe slightly different than a traditional running back, and also an opportunity for Kenny McIntosh in that as well. I think there's a lot to think about for how Georgia uses those running backs this season, which could be a lot of fun. Pete Ellis, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. Randy Hall mentions the fact that Rashawn Hammonds has decided to keep his name in the NBA draft. We haven't talked a lot about that, but that is a story that's out there. And obviously for Georgia now, in the post-Ant-Man era, now Hammond's gone. Got a nice grad transfer from George Mason recently, but Georgia will have a pretty decidedly different look on the court for this upcoming season than it had a year ago. That's a pretty good point. Let's see what else. Anything else? Philip Jordan Wells says that Jimbo Shrimp Fisher will have some success at A&M, but he's never going to be LSU, never going to be Alabama. I think there's at least some pressure on Jimbo this year to overcome a couple of those SEC West rivals, be better than all of a sudden the LSU A&M rivalry has actually gotten pretty good, and pressure to win that game, especially given the fact that there's some intensity associated with that series all of a sudden, and then the Auburn game probably there as well. Wiley Foster Jr. kind of weighing in on a topic we were kind of talking about. Yeah, I think that Wiley and I are kind of on the same page here. I don't need for Georgia to be as good as LSU was offensively. They may not need to, given the fact that the Georgia defense has the potential to be quite stout, but it does need to improve. And the mechanism by which LSU improved a year ago, I think is a similar mechanism that Georgia needs to use to its advantage this year. Doesn't need to have a quarterback throw 60 touchdown passes, but just being a little bit more modern to couple with what can be a very stout defense. That could be the only recipe that Georgia really needs. Very good stuff, y'all. Good comments. We appreciate you being here. Killian Worthy brings a pretty good point about the basketball team. Obviously, last season, Georgia suffered from a lack of bigs down low. And when you look at this team trying to get back to an NCAA tournament, now some of this was not necessarily of Crean's doing last season, but when you look at Georgia looking to kind of get back into an NCAA tournament conversation, being better in the front court is absolutely a very important part of that. And so I guess Georgia's potentially also in the mix for more transfers there as well. And my guess is if you look at that as a possibility, then looking at a big man, maybe the way that Georgia goes there in that regard. Georgia was not a good rebounding team last season, and it is very, very tough to win games at the highest level of college basketball if you're not keeping teams off the offensive glass. And last season, Georgia was not doing that. Fun stuff. Thanks for being a part of our RS Sanders School Down today here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Make sure you check out ESOG, my friends over there. Give them a call. Dial 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Also, big shout out to the AJC. Really good coverage there of what's going on with the coronavirus as Georgia tries to get back to work here in kind of a slow, measured phase. Also, I guess there is some thought of maybe some storms coming in today. AJC will have good coverage on all of that. and a look at the life of Don Shula, the legendary football coach. I guess most famously from my generation, from the Miami Dolphins, the coach of these 72 undefeated Dolphins. He passed away. A nice look at him in the AJC today there as well. So good sports coverage. Also plenty of very fact-based coverage of what's happening with the coronavirus. You can find all of that and all of your Atlanta news now at ajc.com. Thanks to all of you for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Y'all have a great day. I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.